This one is a CTA question from 2009. It is a fairly tricky question in some regards. Well, it appears to be fairly tricky in some regards. And when you actually break it down and start analyzing it, it isn't so bad. So the question is a company called Safetynet. They basically provide security surveillance systems. As before, let's have a look at the scenario first. So the background here, if you want to read through this, you're on the audit team of this company. Year end, 28th of February 2009. Everything's computerized, journal entries. There's your main heading that comes up. And you'll see there that there are then 2 journal entries put through, one on the 16th of February, one on the 28th of February. The first journal entry deals with the capitalization of a trademark. And again, you start to get nervous when you look at trademarks. But again, let's break it down. It's not that difficult. The second one deals with the receipt of an administration fee that was charged by this company's subsidiary, charged to this company's subsidiary. So it's money coming in, being paid from the subsidiary to the holding company. Those are the 2 journal entries. We look over the page again, and we see a heading up there, provisions. So provisions obviously have been quite a big thing in these tests over the years. We've got 3 provisions in there: a warranty provision, a provision for legal costs, and a provision for accumulated leave. And then there are some notes around those 3 provisions. If we look at the required, A, list the substantive procedures you'd perform to verify the journal entries. So the 2 journal entries, what are you going to do to test those? It even goes and says there, hint, make use of the assertions. Okay, so take their hint and let's structure this thing around the assertions. Then part B, in respect of the provisions, part 1, state whether you agree with the accounting treatment of the provision for legal costs. They've gone and capitalized or provided $325,000 for legal costs. It's to do with a claim that's been instituted against the company for damages by an employee who got retrenched. So we need to decide whether that's appropriately provided for. 5 marks. And then list the substantive procedures you'd perform for the warranty provision and the provision for accumulated leave. So you're seeing in these requireds big emphasis on substantive procedures. I mean, it's literally 40, 50 marks a time, all dealing with describe the substantive procedures. So, like with the previous questions, my recommendation would be that you attempt the question on your own first. Don't do it as a full-blown attempt, do it as a high-level summary. Jot down the ideas, jot down the framework, give some thought, see if you can identify the assertions that relate to these various journal entries and these various provisions. See if you can then identify the assertions and then start trying to document the procedures you could perform to test those assertions. All right, so yeah, take the 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, and give it a go. When you're ready, obviously come back to the DVD, and then we'll go through the question together, and let's confirm the degree to which you got things right. Yeah, hopefully right as opposed to not right. Okay. Let's then have a look through the approach to this question. If we pull up the map, this one, the maps, I've split it in 2 because this was a 50-mark question. There's quite a lot of detail in these. So I'm going to deal with sheet 1 here of this first map, dealing with the first parts of the required, and then obviously the second map will deal with the second parts of the required. If we, as always, start with understanding the required, part A, a good place to start. And this was the one dealing with the journal entries. So our required was to list the substantive procedures you would perform to verify the journal entries, purchase of a trademark. Just be careful that purchase of the trademark, it's not just the purchase. It's to do with how it was financed, creates a problem as well. It basically has been financed by a subsidiary of this holding company. So there's a loan that's being established. We're going debit trademark, credit loan to subsidiary, loan from subsidiary. So there are going to be issues there in terms of the asset and liability. The asset being the trademark, the liability being the loan from the subsidiary, and the transaction being the purchase and funding of the trademark that's taken place. The second journal entry was then the management services admin fee that we received. Reminder of the hint, the required asks you to make use of the assertions. There would then be a strong expectation that in the solution there would be a reference to the assertions. So let's have a look at how we would approach this. If we deal with the first journal entry, the trademark. The important recognition here, and I've alluded to it briefly, is that this journal entry is a transaction. It's being recorded on the 16th of February. It is debiting something, crediting something. It is a transaction. Obviously, coming out of this transaction, we have assets and liabilities that are created. It's therefore quite important to break your approach down into that transaction and then the relevant assets and liabilities that come from it. In general, these kind of things, when we have a question that asks us to do things like this, we should be tracing the journal entry through to the relevant accounts in the general ledger just to confirm that they have been taken through into the right places. Always include a reference to management representations. Preferably, though, in doing that, be specific. So you need to bring in the why component. So it won't just be obtain management representation. Okay, you've got the verb, obtain, management representation, you've got the what, but you don't have the, you've got the how and the what, you don't have the why. It's fine to get a management representation, but about what? In this case here, regarding the trademark, the key thing there probably is to do with the valuation of the trademark, what it's worth, that it isn't impaired, the amortization issues relating to it. Those are the kind of things that you want representation on. Okay, and then this one doesn't mention you may ignore presentation and disclosure assertions. So my recommendation is that you then bring those presentation and disclosure concerns into your general heading. In this case here, making sure that the loan is adequately identified as a related party and that the trademark is adequately disclosed as an intangible in the statement of financial position. Looking at the transaction, as always, our starting point in terms of a framework is the 5 transaction event assertions. Those are the 5 things we have to prove about this transaction, about this trademark purchase. From an occurrence point of view, the question we're asking here is it appropriate that it has been recorded? So is it legitimate? Did it actually happen? And there's some fairly obvious procedures there. I mean, get the agreement of purchase. Inspect it, make sure that it's properly signed. Make sure that the decision to go and purchase the trademark has been appropriately authorized. Minutes, it's within the powers of the directors in terms of the Articles of Association. It is a trademark, so there would be a requirement to register the trademark. Go and get the registration documents of the trademark. That would establish that, therefore, we have actually bought a trademark. Look, it's registered. If it hasn't been registered, because this is happening towards the end of the year, then typically the registration of a trademark will be done through a firm of attorneys. Get confirmation from the attorneys that the request for the registration has been made and that the thing is in the process of being registered. That's in terms of the trademark. The other side from the occurrence is it legitimate that they've gone and funded this through getting a loan from their subsidiary? We obviously need to inspect the loan agreement with the subsidiary and see that that makes sense, that the terms and conditions are not unreasonable. And just here confirm that Companies Act requirements have not been breached in any way. You are dealing with a loan from a subsidiary to a holding company, so we do need to be a little bit careful there. In terms of completeness, not applicable. Again, we're asked to describe the procedures to test the journal entry. So there is nothing missing. The journal entry has been recorded. They've gone debit this, credit that. It would be different if it was describe the audit procedures to test trademarks or to test intercompany liabilities. Then, sure, you need to go and get evidence that they haven't, none of them have been left out. Okay, but in terms of the transaction, there is only one transaction we're looking at. Accuracy, the amount, so we know what the amount is because the journal entry specifies that. We've gone and capitalized 2.5 million here. That amount should agree to the purchase agreement. It should also agree to the loan agreement. So that's how much it cost us, that's how much we've borrowed. Just a reference to, they do indicate that this is bought from an overseas company, a company in China. So there is likely to be a forex conversion. You're likely to have to settle this thing in foreign currency. So there would need to be a confirmation that the 2.5 million, that looks quite nice and round. You would want to go along and check that they have done the appropriate forex conversions. Classification. Is it actually a trademark that's been purchased? If there's evidence that it's being registered as a trademark, then clearly it's legitimate. It's appropriate that it is being debited as an intangible asset. And does it meet the definitions of an intangible asset? So are there grounds to capitalize it? Does it have a future benefit? Those various conditions. From a cutoff perspective, the dates of the agreements, does this purchase relate to the current year? The journal entry was put through on the 16th of February. That is quite close to year end. Are you sure that the dates in the agreement correspond to the 2009 financial year? So has ownership transferred prior to year end? Are we entitled to capitalize this trademark at the 16th of February? Okay, that's looking at the transaction.